Hi there! Ako nga pala si Trisha Janda, isa akong accountant from We Bake Bread. And today, ipapakita ko sa inyo ang costing system na ginagamit namin, which is ang job order costing system.
So ano nga ba yung objectives natin after this video? So after this video, you should be able to describe the important features of job order costing system. So bakit nga ba natin ginagamit ang job order costing system? And then, you should be able to explain the job cost sheets and kung paano to ginagamit. Dito natin makikita yung mga flow ng material cost natin, labor cost, and overhead cost. We should be able to journalize the flow cost using actual and normal costing, which will be further discussed later. And then, syempre, need din natin i-account ang ating production losses. One that is generally applied to all jobs and to a specific jobs. Lastly, we should be able to prepare our statement of cost of goods manufactured and sold.
So ano nga ba yung nature of job order costing system? So dito, malalaman natin yung cost per product according to customer specifications and makakapag-set tayo ng profitable price. Dito rin natin madedetermine kung magkano nga ba yung na-incur nating materials, labor, and overhead para ma-produce yung specific product na yun. So in a job order costing system, some source documents na we can encounter are, number 1, the job cost sheet. So sa job cost sheet, this usually serves as the subsidiary ledger for the jobs in process. So this is used to track direct and indirect costs. And it usually contains the following. Job number. Ang job number natin is uniquely applied to each job. Job description. Ano nga ba yung ginagawa natin sa job na to? Name and address of the customer, date ordered, and date of delivery. And syempre, doon natin matatrack yung direct materials natin, which can be derived from the materials requisition form. So, dito makikita natin yung description ng materials used, yung quantity nun, at kung magkano nga ba yung materials na nagamit. Sa direct labor section naman natin, madederive natin siya, example na lang is sa employee time ticket. So, makikita natin doon yung number of hours work, yung rate per hour, at yung total cost ng direct labor natin. Lastly, dun din natin makikita yung overhead section. So here we have an example of We Bake Bread's job cost sheet. Makikita natin dito yung job number, kung anong department yung gumagawa nito, when was it initiated, when will it be completed, and kung ilan yung units na mako-complete natin. We can also see the direct materials, yung required number nito, and kung magkano yon. The direct labor, which is yung time ticket natin, employee time ticket reference. We also have the hours worked, kung ilan yung hours, and the cost of it. Also, we have the manufacturing overhead part, which will be further discussed later. So, for our cost summary, dito natin ilalagay lahat. Yung direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, and yung total cost nitong lahat, and unit product cost. Next, we have the materials requisition slip. So, the materials requisition slip, ito yung nagpapakita kung ilan yung mga materials na inisyu natin sa production. So, for proper internal control, sinabi na no material should be released from the stockroom unless the proper authority approves the release of materials through a material requisition slip. So, sino nga ba yung proper authority na to? So, usually, ang materials requisition slip or form natin is given to the storekeeper. So, here is a sample of We Bake Bread's materials requisition form. So, makikita natin dito yung format nito like the request number, location, request date, requested by, then yung signature ng storekeeper natin, and then makikita yung order number kung ilan, material code kung ano yung specific na hinihingi nating materials, description nito, kung quantity, and kung kailan siya kailangan. So, next source document natin is the purchase requisition form. So, this is the written request sent para ma-inform natin ang purchasing department sa mga needed materials natin. So, usually, 2 copies ang ginagawa. One is for the purchasing department, which is sila yung magtatago ng original copy. Next is para kay Sam, the storeroom clerk. So, si Sam ang in charge na mag-track ng mga orders na pinlace natin. So, here we have an example of We Bake Bread's purchase requisition form. So, makikita natin dito yung delivery date kung kailan natin nire-request, kung ilan yung quantity, kung ano yung description ng materials na kailangan natin, and yung unit and total price nito. So, dito sa baba, nakikita natin yung proposed by, approved by, approved by. So, proposed by, usually, ang nagre-request nito is yung production manager natin. And then, this would be approved by our purchasing department and our storeroom clerk. Next, we have our purchase order or PO. So, this is a written request sent to our supplier para sa mga specified goods na kailangan namin at an agreed upon price. So, here we have Sally. Sally is our supplier and she usually keeps the original copy kung saan nakalagay kung ano yung mga requested orders namin. And then, one will be given to the receiving department para ma-alert sila ng expected time of delivery and kung ano-ano yung mga di-deliver sa aming products. And lastly, one will be kept by the purchasing department to maintain all purchase orders and para ma-file nila ito. So, here we have We Bake Bread's purchase order form. So, dito natin makikita yung supplier name and kung saan sila located, and yung buyer name which is our company and kung saan kami located. So, makikita natin yung mga quantity requested namin, yung descriptions kung ano-ano yung mga products na in-order, yung unit price neto, and kung magkano yung total amount. On the lower part, makikita natin delivery address. So, dito natin isa-send yung product kung saan yung located yung factory natin or kung saan nagaganap yung production. And then, we can see the delivery date, kung kailan to i-deliver, and kung ano yung payment terms.
Lastly, for We Bake Bread source documents, we have the receiving report or delivery receipt. So, the receiving report is the proof that when the goods are delivered, the receiving department unpacked and counted them. So, one copy should be kept by the receiving department, which is the original copy. One copy should be given to the purchasing department to indicate that the order was received. Lastly, one copy should be given to our storeroom clerk Sam to give notice that the goods already arrived. So it is important to note na sa accounting, documents should be treated in three-way matching. So what does this mean? Sa three-way matching, dapat nagtutugma ang nakalagay sa ating purchase order, receiving report, at sa sales invoice na ating marireceive. So here we have a sample material receiving report form. Makikita natin dito yung purchase order number, requisition number, kung ano yung mga materials na in-order natin, yung quantity ng mga materials na in-order natin, and yung unit price neto. Makikita rin natin na may portion for freight charge, and then makikita natin yung total kung magkano ang ating babayaran. Next, at the lower part, we can see the date received portion. So, doon natin i-indicate kung kailan natin na-receive yung mga materials, and it shall be signed by the inspector of the receiving department. Quick check muna tayo. Identify daw natin kung ano ang source documents from the following. I'll give you 3 seconds to answer this. Okay, ano nga ba ang source documents sa mga ito? Ang sagot ay... Tchanan! Lahat sila source documents. Although hindi natin na-mention si promissory note, mako-consider pa din tong source document dahil nakaka-affect ito sa ating accounting equation. Ang invoice receipts naman, ito usually yung resibo na marireceive natin. So, considered siya na source documents since ito yung mga proof kung magkano nga ba yung nagastos natin per job. Now, let's proceed sa dalawang costing system na maaari nating gamitin. First is the actual costing system. So to keep it simple, ang actual costing system ay ang paggamit ng actual incurred manufacturing overhead cost na nalalaman lamang after ng production period natin. So next we have our normal costing system. So sa normal costing system, we use the actual direct material and direct labor cost. For the manufacturing overhead, we shall use the predetermined overhead rate or POHR. So how do we get the POHR? As previously discussed, in accounting for overhead, we shall compute for the POHR by dividing the estimated manufacturing overhead cost to the estimated total units in the allocation base. So now let us compare the actual costing system to the normal costing system. Like I said, sa actual costing system, ang overhead applied natin is yung actual overhead incurred natin. Meanwhile, sa normal costing system naman, ang overhead applied ay nakabase sa na-compute nating predetermined overhead rate. So, para ma-compute natin yung applied overhead under normal costing system, kailangan lang natin i-multiply ang actual level of activity. This can be based from the direct labor hours or machine hours, and then i-multiply nga natin ito sa ating computed na OH rate. So, sa normal costing system, ang pag-apply ng overhead ay maaaring magresulta sa overhead variance. Overhead variance meaning we may have over-applied or under-applied. Maaaring sumobra, maaaring nagkulang tayo. So usually, sa mga beginning companies, ang prefer nila is yung actual costing system since wala pa silang way of estimation para malaman yung POHR na gagamitin sa normal costing system. So gaya nga ng sinabi ko kanina, under normal costing system, maaari tayong maka-incur ng overhead variance. So, paano nga ba natin i-compute ito? We simply deduct our applied overhead sa ating actual overhead. And then we can determine whether under or over-applied ang overhead. It is important to note na pag under-applied ang overhead natin, ito yung unfavorable. Bakit? Kasi kailangan nating dagdagan or tataasan pa natin ang cost. So, pag i-journal entry natin ito, we must credit our manufacturing overhead applied. Meanwhile, pag ang overhead naman natin is over-applied, ito yung tinatawag nating favorable. Bakit? Kasi kahit sumobra yung na-apply natin, meaning may chance pa tayo para babaan yung cost natin. So, pag i-journal entry natin ito, we must debit our manufacturing overhead applied. Now, after identifying if over or under applied tayo, kailangan naman nating i-identify kung ititreat ba natin to as material or immaterial. This usually depends on the company's policy. Pag sinabi ni company na i-treat mo yan as immaterial, kailangan i-close natin yung over or under applied na yon sa ating cost of goods sold. So, ang sample journal entry to record the variance is i-credit natin ang manufacturing overhead if under-applied and debit ang cost of goods sold. Paano nga ulit pag over-applied? That's right. Pag over-applied, ide-debit natin ang manufacturing overhead and i-credit naman natin ang cost of goods sold. Now, pag sinabi ni company na i-treat mo yan as material, i-close natin ito sa cost of goods sold, work in process, and finished goods inventory. So, paano nga ba natin i-distribute yung amount na yon? Now, it shall be based on the ending balances. So, pag under-applied, ang manufacturing overhead natin is credited and i-debit natin ang cost of goods sold, work in process, and finished goods inventory. If over-applied naman, ide-debit natin ang manufacturing overhead and doon natin i-credit ang cost of goods sold, work in process, and finished goods inventory. On the next slide, you will be able to practice some activities with my friend Merced.
So, ayan. Thank you, Trisha. So, hello guys. I am Mercedo Campo, and I am also an accountant from We Bake Breads. So, at this point, we will now try to apply what we have learned from Trisha. So, sabi nila, ang accounting daw hindi natututunan sa isang basa lang. And in order for us to appreciate and learn more about the topic and the lessons, we need to be engaged with different problem solving. At ayan ang gagawin natin ngayon. We will try to solve some problems regarding actual and normal costing para naman mas ma-appreciate natin yung topic. Okay, so let's go. Okay, last February, our company had the following inventories. So we have the finished goods, work in process, and the materials accounts. So, sa tingin nyo kaya, ano kaya ang balances na to? Okay, yes, these are our beginning balances. Bakit? Kasi ayan o, kita natin na February 1 pa daw yung accounts. And that means, it is our beginning balances since it happened or it was accounted during the first day of the month. So, kapag may ganyan na sa mga problems na ma-encounter nyo in the future, that gives us a clue na beginning balances yung mga amounts na yan. Yung mga figures na yan. Okay, so we have also here the inclusions of the work in process account. So, we have job 401 and job 402. So, we have two jobs in process. So, pag tinignan natin yung totals, for job 401, we have 7,500. And for job 402, we have 11,000. So, pag tinotal natin yan, 11,000 plus 7,500, we will get 18,500 which is already here. Ayan, makikita natin na siya nga yung balance ng work in process account. So, ang laman ng work in process natin, of course, the three elements of the total manufacturing cost since sinacharge natin sa WIP, di ba? Sinacharge natin sa work in process account lahat ng ating total manufacturing cost, which is the materials, the labor, and the factory overhead. So, mamaya, makikita pa natin yung mga amounts na yan. Magtatagpo-tagpo sila later on. Okay, the following information pertains to February operations. Okay, ayan. So, we have 12 transactions all in all. So, lahat to gagawa natin ng journal entries. Then, afterwards, we will make a job cost sheet. Yung tinuro ni Tricia kanina, isa sa ating mga source document. Then, afterwards, of course, we will post our entries into its respective ledgers. Then, lastly, we will make a statement of cost of goods manufactured and sold. So, ayan, wag mo na kayong ma-overwhelm because don't worry, iisa-isahin naman natin itong mga to. Okay, let's start na. Game na tayo with the journal entries. Okay, number 1. Materials purchase on account, 28,000. So, purchase on account, ibig sabihin, hindi natin siya binayaran in cash. So, giving us an entry of, ayan, we have a debit of course sa materials with 28,000 and credit accounts payable for 28,000 din. So, ang dali, di ba? Pero if ever naman na may ma-encounter kayong other name of the account like raw materials inventory, okay lang yan. Same lang naman siya with the materials account. Okay, let's now proceed with the second entry. Ayan, materials issued for production. So, ibig sabihin, na nag-start na i-process ang ating mga materials, dinala na natin siya into production. So, we have a total amount of 25,000. Again, it is only a total amount kasi makikita natin sa ating sentence na of this amount, 3,000 was for indirect materials and the difference was distributed. 5,500 to job 401, 7,000 to job 402, and 9,500 to job 403. So, ano kaya ang magiging entry natin ito? Ayan, we have a debit in work in process for 22,000. Naku, bakit kaya 22,000 lang? Ang nakalagay is 25,000. Mali na ba yung entry natin? Okay, yes, of course, hindi siya mali. Kasi it is already stated in the problem na hindi lahat direct materials. We have 3,000 for indirect materials and we will not charge it sa work in process dahil hindi siya directly attributable sa ating mga jobs. Kaya instead of charging it to work in process, we will charge it into factory overhead control kasama ng ating mga indirect costs like yung mga indirect labor and such. And also, we will include, of course, a credit into materials ng total amount niya, which is 25,000. Okay? Number 3. Materials returned to the warehouse from the factory, 800, of which 300 was for indirect materials, the balance from job 403. So, in this transaction, ang nangyari lang is nagbalik ng materials mula sa production, pabalik ulit sa ating warehouse. So, in this type of transaction, ang kailangan lang gawin, ang mindset nyo dapat is bawasan kung anong dapat bawasan at dagdagan kung anong dapat dagdagan. Let's apply. Ayan, makikita nyo na nag-debit tayo ulit sa materials for 800. Kasi nga, di ba, nagbalik daw ng materials, so in that case, madadagdagan ulit ang ating materials. For the total of 800. Again, total siya kasi meron ulit na breakdown. 300 daw ay for indirect materials. Ang tanong ko muna, saan ba natin unang chinarge ang indirect materials? Yes, chinarge natin ang indirect materials kanina sa factory overhead control. So, kung dinebit natin siya kanina, edi i-credit natin siya ulit ngayon kasi nga babawasan natin. So, we have there credit factory overhead control for 300. Next, the balance from job 403. Kanina, nung naglagay tayo ng material sa job 403, nag-debit tayo saan? Yes, nag-debit tayo sa work in process account. So, ngayon, kung babawasan na natin ulit yung materials ng work in process account for job 403, edi mag-credit tayo ngayon for work in process ng 500. Kaya ganyan ang itsura ng ating entry for number 3. Number 4. Materials returned to vendors, 1,000. So, nagbalik ulit naman tayo ngayon ng materials, pero ibinalik natin sa pinagbilhan natin sa ating supplier. Ang ating entry for this is, ayan, of course, we will debit accounts payable for 1,000. Bakit? Babayaran mo ba kung ano ang hindi sa'yo? Hindi, di ba? Kaya ang gagawin natin, babawasan natin yung accounts payable natin by debiting it with 1,000. And of course, meron tayong credit sa materials for 1,000 din. Kasi nga, nabawasan yung ating materials ng 1,000. At kung babalikan ulit natin kanina nung binili natin yung materials na to, anong ginawa natin? Dinebit natin ng materials. So ngayon, kung babawasan natin, edi i-credit natin. Ganun lang siya kasimple. Number 5. Payroll after deducting 3,025 for withholding taxes, 1,600 for SSS premiums, 375 for Medicare, and 1,200 for Pag-ibig was 22,800. The payroll due to the employees was paid during the month. So, let's take note Ang sabi dito, after deducting. After. So, ibig sabihin, hindi pa total amount ang 22,800. Hindi pa ito yung i-charge natin sa factory payroll. Let's look at the entry. Ayan. Makikita natin na hindi nga 22,800 ang charge kay factory payroll. Instead, it was 39,000. Paano natin maa-attain ang 39,000? Add lang natin lahat ng amounts dito in order to get 39,000. And of course, i-credit natin lahat ng payables na binanggit, which is the withholding taxes payable, SSS premium payable, PhilHealth contribution payable, or yung Medicare, Pag-ibig funds contribution payable, and of course, the cash. Bakit cash? Ang sabi sa problem, the employees was paid during the month. So, ibig sabihin, naglabas na tayo ng cash. Pero if ever nasabihin na hindi pa binayaran, instead of cash, we would credit accrued payroll. Okay, ganyan lang naman siya kasimple. Let's now go and proceed to number 6. The payroll was distributed as follows. 10,400 to job 401, 12,500 to job 402, 10,500 to job 403, and the balance represents indirect labor. So, disregard muna natin yung mga distribution into jobs. Okay? Kasi gagamitin natin siya mamaya pa sa paggawa ng ating job cost sheets. So, meron na naman daw indirect labor. Ayan, meron na namang indirect labor. Meron na naman tayo indirect cost. So, saan natin sinacharge ang indirect costs? Yes, sa factory overhead control. Kaya kung titingnan natin yung entry, ayan, meron na naman nga tayong factory overhead control. So, we would debit work in process for 33,400. Saan galing yan? Saan kaya galing ang 33,400? Ayan, syempre, i-add natin lahat to, 10,400 plus 12,500 plus 10,500, we would get 33,400. So, dun siya galing. Next, we would debit factory overhead control for the balance. Anong balance? Saan galing yung balance? Okay, balik tayo dito. Ito pong factory payroll na to, it is only a temporary account. Ibig sabihin, kapag hindi pa na-partition into direct and indirect, ito po yung ginagamit nating account. Ngayon, kung halimbawa dito sa number 6, alam na natin kung alin yung direct labor at ang indirect labor, i-credit na natin siya at aalisin na natin siya. And, para makuha natin yung 5,600 na to, we would just deduct the 33,400 or the direct labor into the, or from the 39,000 na factory payroll in order to get 5,600. So, ganun lang. Pagka hindi pa na-distribute ang direct and indirect labor, factory payroll muna. Pero pag ganito may distribution na, alisin na natin sa factory payroll, tapos i-charge na natin yung direct labor sa work in process, at i-charge naman natin yung indirect labor sa factory overhead control. Number 7. The share of the employer for payroll was recorded 2,000 for SSS premiums, 375 for medical contributions, and 1,200 for pag-ibig funds. So, sa payroll, hindi lang naman ang employee ang nagbe-bear ng mga deductions. So, meron ding shoulder ang company namin for the deductions sa mga payroll. So, let's look at the entry. Ayan. We would have a debit for factory overhead control. So, share ko lang, I will give you some tips. Personally kasi, I treat or ang mindset ko sa factory overhead control is isa siyang expense account. Para bang siya yung nag-shoulder or siya, sa kanya napupunta lahat ng expenses na nai-incur for the production. So, for in this case, we would treat kasi yung employer share as an expense kasi nga, yung company ang magbabayad nun. Kaya para siyang expense. So, by saying that, being said, ang ilalagay natin siya sa factory overhead control. Kaya magkakaroon tayo ng debit na factory overhead control for 3,575. Paano natin na-attain yung amount na yan? We would just add 2,000 plus 375 plus 1,200. We would get 3,575. And of course, we would also have a credit para sa mga payables. We have SSS premium payable, PhilHealth contribution payable, and the Pag-ibig funds contribution payable for their respective amounts. So, ganyan tayo mag-record ng employer's share. Hindi na sa factory payroll dinedebit. Next, number 8. Factory overhead other than any previously mentioned amounted to 15,000. Included in this figure were 3,000 for depreciation of factory building and equipment and 950 for expired insurance on the factory. The remaining overhead was unpaid at the end of February. Tignan na agad natin yung entry. So, sabi ko nga kanina, ang treatment ko sa factory overhead control is para siyang expense account. So, kung titignan natin, nagkaroon ulit tayo ng debit for factory overhead control for 15,000. Ito yon, total amount. Yung breakdown niya, ito yon. Included in this figure were 3,000 for depreciation. Normally, paano tayo mag-record ng depreciation? Yes, debit tayo ng depreciation expense tapos credit na accumulated depreciation. Pero in cost accounting, yung depreciation expense na yun ay mapupunta na kay factory overhead control. Kaya nandito na siya. Pero i-record pa rin natin yung accumulated depreciation na 3,000. Next, 954 expired insurance. Normally, paano tayo mag-record ng insurance? Or ng expired insurance? Okay, yes. We would debit insurance expense. So, since nasa cost accounting nga tayo, we would record that insurance expense sa factory overhead control. Dito na din siya mapupunta. Pero, magre-record pa rin tayo ng credit sa prepaid insurance for 950 para ang matira lang sa prepaid insurance natin ay yung mga unexpired insurance lang. And lastly, the remaining overhead daw was unpaid. Kaya, mag-credit tayo ng accounts payable for 11,050. Makukuha natin to after deducting the 3,950 from the 15,000. So, ganyan po tayo mag-record ng expenses for the factory overhead control. Okay, so from this point, magkakaroon naman tayo ng onting differences and mas makikita na natin ang difference ng actual and normal costing. So, yung entries 1 to 8, same lang ang magiging treatment sa mga transactions, whether actual costing or normal costing ang gamitin. So, let's look at entries number 9 and number 10. So, punta muna tayo sa entry number 9. Ang sabi dyan, for actual overhead was applied to production based on direct labor cost. Pag tinignan naman natin kay normal, ang sabi, factory overhead was applied to production at the rate of 80% of direct labor cost. So, sa construction pa lang ng ating problem, meron na agad difference. Kay actual daw, actual overhead ang i-apply mismo. Pero kay normal, factory overhead with predetermined overhead rate which is 80%. So, pag tinignan natin ang ating entry, dito muna tayo kay actual. Okay, ang ginawa dyan is nag-debit tayo ng work in process and nag-credit ng factory overhead control. So, ang logic dito sa ating entry is simply as i-charge natin ang ating factory overhead control kay work in process. Kaya, increasing work in process, we will debit it and decreasing the factory overhead control, we will credit it. Kaya, ganyan ang ating entry. And the amount of 26,875, hindi lang natin makikita pa sa ngayon, pero that is our total actual overhead incurred. Mamaya, magkakaroon tayo ng breakdown yan sa ating, pag nakita na natin ang ating ledger. So, ang allocation naman ng amount na to is here. Kita natin dito sa ating computation. So, ang sabi is based on direct labor cost daw. So, matatandaan natin ang ating mga direct labor cost ay ito po. So, para ma-allocate natin siya based on direct labor cost, i-divide natin siya by its total, which is 33,400, and then i-multiply natin siya by 26,875. Para makuha itong mga amounts na to, and then kapag tinotal po natin yan, ito rin ang lalabas. Okay, pag tumingin naman tayo sa entry ng ating normal costing, same lang, but there would be a difference in the amount. Okay, again, magkakaroon talaga ng difference dahil we will allocate the overhead differently for normal costing. Pag tinignan ulit ang ating computation dito per job, hindi na tayo nag-allocate ng ganito. We allocated it by multiplying it with the predetermined overhead rate which is 80%. Then, makukuha natin itong mga amount na to and pag tinotal din po natin yan, we will get a total of 26,720. Kung gusto naman natin na mabilis ang computation, pwede naman. Ang gagawin na lang ay yung total, which is 33,400, i-multiply natin by 80%, we will get the same amount. Pero kadalasan kasi ang hinihingi sa mga exam is by job. So, kung by job, compute po tayo ng ganito. Okay, let's proceed to entry number 10. Ang sabi, jobs 401 and 402 were completed and transferred to the finished goods warehouse. So, di ba meron tayong tatlong jobs? We have 401, 402, and 403. Ang sabi, ang natapos lang daw is si 401 and 402. So, ang gagawin dyan, tanggalin na natin sa work in process si 401 and 402, ilipat natin kay finished goods. So, kaya ganito po ang entry natin. Increase finished goods by debiting it and decrease work in process by crediting it. With the amount of 72,326. Saan po nanggaling yan? Ito. Okay, breakdown siya per job, pero ang pinaka-breakdown po nito makikita natin mamaya sa ating job cost sheets. So, for job 401, we have 31,768, and for job 402, we have 40,558. Pag tinotal po yan, eto rin yan. Next, punta tayo sa normal. Same lang ulit. Same lang ulit ang ating entry, but there would be a difference again sa ating amounts. I-expect na po natin na magkakaroon tayo talaga ng mga differences sa ating amounts since una sa lahat, iba na po ang ating in-apply na overhead. Kaya magkakaroon na talaga ng differences mula dito hanggang sa mga susunod pa pong entries. So, breakdown ulit per job. Ito po, job 401, naging 31,720, iba na rin siya dito. Kasi nga, iba na po ang ating overhead. And then, for job 402, we have 40,500, dito, 40,558. Pero pag tinotal po natin yan, ito pa rin ang lalabas. Okay. So, we have here the entry number 11. Ang sabi, job 401 was shipped and billed at a gross profit of 40% of the cost. So, kanina, anong sabi natin? Ang natapos natin is si 401 and si 402. Pero, ang nabenta lang daw is si 401. So, palagi nating tatandaan na pag magre-record tayo ng sale or ng benta, we would always have two entries. One for the cost and one for the sale. So, let's look at this. Ito muna tayo. Since we are using perpetual inventory system, every time we record a sale, we would debit cost of goods sold. And then credit finished goods kasi nga, wala na sa warehouse natin yung job 401 na yan kasi nabenta na siya, di ba? So, yung cost ng job 401 na yan is this. The 31,768 and we would account that for the cost. Next, to record naman yung sale, yung pangalawang entry. Walang sinabi na nagbayad si customer. Kaya magde-debit tayo ng accounts receivable and then credit tayo ng sales. This amount, eto siya. Paano makuha? 31,768 or yung cost ng job 401, multiply natin by 1.4. Saan naman nanggaling si 1.4? Ang sabi, gross profit of 40% of the cost. So, ibig sabihin nun, isang buong cost, tapos add mo yung 40% pa nung cost, that would be the selling price or the sales. Kaya magkakaroon tayo dito ng 44,475. Pag tinignan natin sa normal costing, it is almost the same except for the amounts. Kasi nga, uulitin ko ulit, magkakaiba na talaga ng amount dahil magkaiba tayo ng in-apply na overhead. So, dito, ang cost na ng job 401 is 31,720 and then multiply lang ulit sa 1.4 to get the selling price or the sales which is 44,408. So, ganyan lang siya. Sana malinaw pa tayo. Let's now go to entry number 12. Ang sabi, any over or under applied overhead are close to cost of goods sold. So, sige nga, apply natin yung tinuro ni Trisha kanina. Kapag kinlose sa cost of goods sold, anong ibig sabihin nun? Material or immaterial? Yes, it is immaterial. And then, let's look now to the entries. Naku, wala tayong entry for actual costing. Bakit kaya? Yes, it is because ang in-apply na nga nating overhead is yung actual incurred overhead. Kaya, sobrang imposible na meron pa tayong over or under applied or imposible na may ma-record pa tayong variance. Now, let's look at the normal costing. Tingin muna tayo dito sa computation. Ang actual overhead natin is 26,875. Ang applied overhead natin ay 26,720 lang. Anong mas mataas, si actual or si applied? Yes, si actual overhead. So that means, are we over-applied or under-applied? Yes, that is under-applied kasi mas mataas yung naging actual overhead natin kumpara sa in-apply nating overhead. Kaya itong 155 dito, it is under-applied overhead. Ngayon, paano natin siya i-close? Ano bang mas madami muna? Dinebit natin o yung kinredit natin? Yes, correct. Ang mas marami ay yung i-debit natin. Kasi 'di ba, every time we incur overhead kanina, anong ginagawa natin? Debit tayo ng debit. Tapos nung in-apply natin, anong ginawa natin? Kinredit. So ibig sabihin, kung mas mataas ang actual overhead natin, mas marami tayong i-debit kaysa sa ikinredit. So kung mas marami yung i-debit natin, para i-close natin yung mas maraming debit na yun, i-credit natin. Kaya magkakaroon tayo dito ng credit sa manufacturing overhead applied ng 155 pesos. Tapos, close daw sa COGS. Kaya magkakaroon tayo ng debit sa cost of goods sold. And isa pang reason bakit tayo nag-debit sa cost of goods sold is because, ibig sabihin ng under-applied variance is unfavorable. Parehong U. Unfavorable, under-applied. Ibig sabihin ng unfavorable, madadagdagan yung ating cost. Kaya nagkaroon tayo ng debit sa cost of goods sold. Okay, so ayan, we are finally done with the journal entries and now we are going to proceed with the job cost sheets. So, meron different job cost sheets din tayo for actual costing and normal costing since ayun nga, for the same reason that we are using different overheads. So, unahin natin sa job 401. Alam naman natin na completed and sold siya. And we have here the beginning balances. So, ito yung kanina. And then, the additions, ito yung mga na-incur for this month. And then, we have a total of 31,768. Ito yung kanina pa natin nakikita. And, mapupunta siya sa finished goods since, yun nga, nakompleto siya for this month. Next, we have job 402, completed and in the warehouse. Nakompleto siya, pero hindi siya na benta. So, ito yung beginning balances din niya, additions, total, and of course, mapupunta din sa finished goods since nakompleto siya this month. And lastly, our job 403. Okay, hindi siya nakompleto, kaya magre-remain siya sa ating work in process account. Hindi rin siya syempre nabenta kasi hindi siya kompleto. And kung makikita nyo, incurred. So, kaya incurred yan kasi wala siyang beginning balances. Because this month, this February lang siya, this February lang siya ginawa and sinimulan. Kaya ito yung mga na-incur niya for this February, for this month of February. And then, ni-record din natin yung sinauling material. Ito, yung 500 kanina na sinauling material from the production. Having us a total of 27,949. Okay, job cost sheet naman for normal costing. So, same jobs lang din ulit, yung tatlong jobs, 401, 402, and 403. Ang differences na lang siguro netong actual and normal costing job cost sheets would be here. Sa column na to talaga. Sa column lang ng overhead nagkakaiba. And then, because of that, syempre, magkakaroon din ng differences on totals of the jobs. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo kanina ng mga differences sa mga total natin. Ayan. So, same lang naman ng elements. We have the materials, labor, and overhead. And then, we have the same row titles here. Ayun lang. Doon lang talaga nagkakaiba sa ating overhead. Okay. So, we are done with the job cost sheets. We will now proceed with the ledgers. So, unahin natin ang ledger ng raw materials inventory in terms of actual costing. So, makikita natin na we have the beginning balance, and then the purchases, we have purchased 28,000, issued 25,000, returned 800, and then returned another 1,000, giving us a total of 24,800. So, ito na yung gagamitin nating ending balance later on as we make the statement of cost of goods manufactured and sold. But ang tanong ko muna here is, sa tingin nyo ba, there would be difference when we see the raw materials inventory ledger using normal costing? The answer is no. There would be no difference. Same lang sila ng balances. Sa tingin nyo, bakit kaya? Same lang ng balances because raw materials inventory have no overhead element. Wala pa siyang kahit anong element ng overhead. Eh di ba ang nagpapaiba lang naman sa actual and normal costing is the overhead applied. Since wala pang element ng overhead ang raw materials inventory, expect na natin na walang magiging difference sa kanilang balances. Ang tanging may element lang ng overhead is si work in process and si finished goods. Kaya i-expect nyo na rin na later on as we see the ledgers of the work in process and finished goods, there would be differences na sa balances. And also as we see, we have the same transactions. Kaya napaka-imposible talaga na magkaroon pa sila ng differences. Okay, sa ledger naman tayo ng work in process and unahin natin si actual costing. So, ayan, makikita naman natin, meron ulit tayong beginning balance, and then yung in-issue natin na material sa production, andyan siya, tapos yung ibinalik, and then yung na-incur nating labor, tapos yung overhead. And then yung total cost ng mga natapos na hindi na in process, itinanggal natin kay work in process, giving us a balance of 27,949. So, ito yung amount na nagpapaiba dyan. Kaya kung makikita natin, tignan na nga natin yung sa normal costing. Ayan, nagkaiba nga dito sa overhead. Kaya magkakaroon din syempre ng pagkakaiba sa ating finished goods. Ayan, nagkaiba din siya. Kaya, of course, magkakaiba din talaga sa ending balances. Ayan, so kitang-kita naman na kung saan nagkaiba, sana naman ay gets na gets nyo na to. Okay, so finished goods ledger naman tayo. Unahin ulit natin si actual costing. So, ayan, syempre hindi pwedeng mawala si beginning balance. Then, etong completed, kitang-kita natin yung amount. Ito yung pinagsamang amount ni Job 401 and Job 402. Tapos yung nabenta lang, yung tinanggal natin kay finished goods, yung cost lang ni Job 401. Para ang matira lang kay finished goods is yung cost lang ni Job 402. Syempre, kasama na rin yung ating beginning balance, which would give us an ending balance of 65,558. Tingnan natin yung kay normal. Kay normal, same lang. Same components, except again for the amounts. Syempre, ulitin natin. Magkakaiba na dahil si finished goods po ay meron ng component or element ng overhead. Kaya magkakaiba na siya. And iba yung completed dito, iba rin yung sold. Kaya syempre magkakaiba rin sa ating ending balance, which is 65,500. Okay, so lastly, we have the manufacturing overhead. Ayan, unahin ulit natin sa actual costing. So, makikita dyan lahat ng ating in-incur na overhead for February. Yung indirect materials natin, pati yung ibinalik na indirect materials, yung indirect labor, lahat ng ating payable, depreciation, insurance, and such. Lahat ng ating naging expenses ay na kay manufacturing overhead. At kung makikita nyo po, itong 26,875, this is our total actual overhead. At ito rin yung buong in-apply natin sa ating work in process. Kaya po walang natira. Naging zero to. Kaya kung titingnan natin ang normal costing, same lang naman halos. Actually, lahat ng elements dito ay same. Pero ang in-apply lang natin sa ating work in process account ay 26,720 lang. Kaya merong natirang 155. And this is what we call the under-applied variance. And we have already accounted for this kanina. We have closed it to the cost of goods sold. So, ito na po yung whole breakdown ng ating overhead. Ito yung nagiging sanhi ng difference ng actual costing and ng normal costing. Ayan, so hinga-hinga tayo because we are now down on the last part of our problem, which is the making of the cost of goods manufactured and sold. So, dating gawi, unahin natin si actual costing. So, this is the statement of cost of goods manufactured and sold of We Baked Breads for the period ended February 28, 2021. So, in order to get the cost of goods sold na ending natin ito, 31,768. Familiar tayo dito sa amount na to. Ito yung cost ng job 401. Kasi 'di ba siya lang yung nabenta. So in order to get that, unahin natin kunin si total manufacturing cost. Ano bang laman ng total manufacturing cost? We have the DM, DL, and OH. Kapag actual costing, palaging tandaan na kapag DM actual, DL actual, and OH natin is actual din. So lahat actual pag actual costing. So unahin natin si DM. Direct materials used will be attained by having first the beginning balance. Add natin sa net purchases, we will get the direct materials available for use. Tapos deduct natin si ending balance and si indirect materials, makukuha natin si 21,500. Ito na yung DM used natin. Ang DL natin is 33,400. Ito yung na-compute natin kanina. And ang ating factory overhead, ang actual overhead natin is 26,875. So, ayan yung actual overhead natin. Pag inad natin yung tatlong yan, we will get the total manufacturing cost of 81,775. So, next naman natin gagawin is i-add natin ang ating beginning work in process. Then, we will get the cost of goods put into process. Tapos mula dyan, sa amount na yan, we will deduct the ending WIP. So, ito yung balance or ito yung amount ng job 403. Familiar tayo dyan kanina sa job cost sheet natin. Nakita natin yan. Tapos, pag na-deduct na natin, we will get the cost of goods manufactured. Ito naman yung amount ng job 401 and 402. Kasi diba silang dalawa yung jobs na natapos this month. From that amount, we will add the beginning finished goods inventory. Then, we will get the goods available for sale. Tapos, i-deduct ulit natin yung ending balance naman ng finished goods. Ito naman yung amount ng job 402. Kasi diba, natapos si 402 pero hindi siya nabenta. Kaya, ito yung amount nun kasama yung beginning balance natin. And, by deducting that, we will get the cost of goods sold na 31,768. Ito na yung amount ni job 401. So, para mas ma-compare natin, let's now go to normal costing. Okay, so for normal costing, we also have the same computation, same process lang. Pero magkakaroon ng pagkakaiba sa ibang amounts. So, for DM, we also have the same. Parehong 21,500. And sa DL din, parehong 33,400. Magkakaiba lang tayo ulit sa overhead. Because bakit? Paano tayo mag-compute ng total manufacturing cost pag normal costing? Ang DM natin, actual. Ang DL natin, actual. Pero ang OH natin is applied. Kaya magkakaroon na talaga ng difference sa ating TMC. Kung makikita nyo dyan, magkaiba na ang ating TMC. Tapos, same process lang ulit. Magkakaiba lang ulit sa ating ending ng work in process. Kasi iba na yung cost ni job 403 niyan. Iba na rin ang ating cost of goods manufactured kasi iba na rin yung cost ni job 401 and 402. Tapos, same process ulit. Siyempre, magkakaiba na rin sa ating ending finished goods kasi iba na rin yung cost ni job 402, di ba? Tapos, ang magiging cost of goods sold natin at the end is 31,720. Ito yung cost ni job 401. Pero this is still unadjusted. Remember, or tatandaan natin, na meron tayong under-applied variance. Kanina, ang ginawa natin, nag-debit tayo sa cost of goods sold. Ibig sabihin nun, magdadagdag tayo ng cost. Kaya nakalagay dito, add under applied factory overhead. So, dinagdag natin yung 155 na variance in order to get our final cost of goods sold, which is 31,875. So, ayan lang yung pinaka-difference ng actual costing and normal costing. And here, I will end my lecture about actual costing and normal costing, pero mamaya magtatagpo-tagpo pa tayo. For now, I will give again the stage for Trisha, and kapit lang tayo guys, malapit na to.
Alright, so thank you for that, Merced. So now, let's proceed naman sa product and material losses in job order costing system. So here we have the spoiled units. Ang spoiled units is yung mga units na hindi napasok sa production standards natin. These are usually taken out of production and no further work is performed. So sample spoiled units in We Bake Bread is yung mga slightly overcooked pastries namin. Yes, we can no longer sell this at its whole price, but we can still sell it at a lower price. Say, ilalagay namin sila sa promo or sale para hindi naman tayo totally magka-loss ng malaki. So the money earned from that is what we call the salvage value. So under spoiled units, meron tayong two methods. Number one is yung charge to a specific job, and the other one is yung charge to all jobs. So first, let us discuss yung normal spoilage attributable to a specific job. So like the title itself, ang spoilage cost na to ay i-charge lang natin dun sa specific job na yon. Bakit nga ba nagkakaroon ng spoilage dito? Nagkakaroon ng spoilage dahil ang paggawa nito ay may required exacting specification or medyo complicated ang process. In effect, mag-i-increase ang unit cost ng remaining perfect units na nagawa natin. So usually, china-charge natin ito sa work-in-process account if meron tayong recoverable cost or may makukuha tayong salvage value. If wala, there are no journal entry required. Now, let's proceed sa number 2, ang normal spoilage common to all jobs. So, simply put, ang cost charge na manufacturing overhead natin ay ipapakalat over all jobs. So, lahat ng units na na-manufacture natin during the period ay macha-charge ng additional cost which would be added to the factory overhead rate. So, yung unit cost natin na originally charged, hindi na to mag-i-increase anymore even if may makita pa tayong spoiled units afterwards. So, ang entry para mag-record nito, if meron tayong recovered goods, ide-debit natin yung spoiled good sa recovered amount natin, ide-debit din natin yung factory overhead control sa natitirang loss natin, and then, i-credit natin ito sa work in process. Now, if wala naman tayong recovered amount, all we have to do is debit factory overhead and credit work in process dun sa amount ng loss incurred natin. Lastly, under spoilage, meron din tayong abnormal spoilage. So, sa abnormal spoilage, i-charge natin ito as a loss and mag-a-appear na ito sa income statement. So, now, let's go back to Merced with some examples.
Okay, so itry ulit natin i-apply kung ano yung bagong learning natin from Trisha. So, noong February 2021 kasi, yung company namin ay nakapag-produce ng 1,000 pieces of cakes. Pero doon sa 1,000 na yun, may 200 cakes na hindi na-meet yung specifications ng company namin and were considered spoiled. The manufacturing cost per unit is as follows. So, ang direct materials namin is 336 per unit. So, andyan yung flour, yung cost ng sugar, and such. Ang direct labor cost per unit naman namin is 294. So, kasama naman dyan yung mga sweldo ng mga bakers namin, ganyan. At ang lastly, ang manufacturing overhead namin is 210 per unit. So, andyan naman yung mga expenses na na-incur namin for the whole production process. The selling price of goods are sold 30% markup on sales. So, pag sinabi nating markup on sales, ang 100% dyan agad is si sales. So, 100% si sales, tapos 30% si gross profit, ang i-allocate natin for cost is 70%. Whereas spoiled goods are sold for 300 pesos. So, although hindi na namin mabibenta yung mga cakes na yun for its original price, pwede pa namin siya mabenta in a lower price, which is, ayan, for this case, is 300 pesos. So, for this problem, we are required to, number 1, magkano daw yung loss if the spoiled work is spread over all jobs? So, mula ulit sa natutunan natin kay Tricia, if it is spread over all jobs, saan natin i-charge? Definitely, i-charge natin siya sa manufacturing overhead. And we are required to make the entries and the unit selling price if markup is 30%. So, unit selling price siya. Ibig sabihin, hindi tayo magsa-stop if nalaman na natin si unit cost. Tatagos natin siya, aalamin pa natin si selling price. And number 2, ayan, aalamin naman natin kung magkano yung magiging cost naman daw sa company namin if yung spoiled work is charged to a specific job. So again, mula ulit sa natutunan natin kay Tricia, kapag specific job, saan natin i-charge? Tama, i-charge naman natin ngayon sa work in process account. Again, ulitin natin, kapag all jobs, manufacturing overhead. Kapag specific job, work in process. Okay, tama. And aalamin ulit natin yung, of course, same lang with number 1, yung entries. And letter B, unit selling price if markup is 30%. So, makikita natin dito, may magbabago kaya sa mga unit cost nila? Ayan, sabay-sabay nating i-discover. Okay, so let's now solve for number 1. Ang number 1 natin again is spread to all jobs. So, tingnan na natin ang entries. Okay, ayan. Ang ating entries would include a debit to spoiled goods, debit to factory overhead control, and credit to work in process. Si spoiled goods po, siya ang magre-represent ng ating recovered cost. Again, recovered cost. Kaya ang computation natin dito is 300. Saan galing si 300? Ito po siya. Diba, nabenta natin ang ating spoiled goods for 300, so siya ang ating recovered cost per unit. Multiply natin by our spoiled units, which is 200, for us to be able to get 60,000. Kung ang spoiled goods po natin ay ang ating recovered cost, ang ating factory overhead control would represent our unrecovered cost. Pero bago yan, magkano ba muna ang ating total manufacturing cost per unit? Add nyo lang po lahat ang ating DM, DL, at ang ating OH, we would able to get 840. Ito yon. So, from that 840, nakapag-recover tayo ng 300, edi ang ating unrecovered cost per unit ay 540. Tapos, multiply lang ulit natin by our spoiled units, which is 200, for us to be able to get 108,000. Tapos, ito namang ating work in process account, ibig sabihin lang nito, tatanggalin natin sa ating jobs yung spoiled units. Kaya mag-credit tayo sa work in process. And for that, we will account the total amount of the spoiled units, which is 168,000. So, let's proceed to number 2. Ayan, we would get naman is the unit selling price if markup is 30%. So, here we have a computation. Siyempre, unahin natin kunin si unit cost. Ang computation natin for unit cost would be the total cost minus the total cost of the spoiled units over good units. So, good units tayo. So, 840,000 ang ating total cost. Paano nakuha yun? Ito po siya. Ito ang ating computation ng ating total cost. Yung total manufacturing cost per unit natin, i-multiply lang natin by our produced units, we will able to get 840,000. Tapos, ito namang 168,000 dito po natin siya nakuha. Yung ating total manufacturing cost pa rin per unit, multiply naman natin by our spoiled units. So we will be able to get the total cost per spoiled or total cost for the spoiled units. Ngayon, ang good units natin magiging ganito. Di ba 1,000 ang na-produce natin. Siyempre, tatanggalin nga natin sa production yung spoiled, kaya magiging 800 na lang po siya. So, from that, we will get a unit cost of 840. Naku, kung mapapansin nyo po, pareho lang siya with our total manufacturing cost na original. So, this gives us a clue na kapag spread to all jobs, wala na pong magbabago sa ating mga unit cost. So, halimbawa, pag nagpa-exam at tinanong, spread to all jobs, wag na po tayong mag-compute. Add na lang natin lahat ng ating total manufacturing cost dito and we will be able to answer the question. Okay, let's now proceed with the selling price. So, ang ating unit cost, i-divide lang natin with 70% since ang sabi ko nga kanina, ang cost natin would be 70%. So, we would be able to get our final selling price which is 1,200. Okay, so number 2 na tayo. Ang number 2 natin is charge to specific job. So, ang entry natin ay, ayan, would include a debit to spoiled goods and credit to work in process. Okay, again, kapag charge to specific job, saan natin sina-charge? Sa work in process. Since ang ating total manufacturing cost po ay nasa loob na ng ating work in process, hindi na tayo magcha-charge ulit. Dapat hindi na magcha-charge ulit. Pero if ever na ganito, katulad ng sa ating problem, na meron tayong recovered amount or recovered cost, syempre, ide-deduct natin yun from that work in process or from that job. Kaya, ang mangyari ay magde-debit tayo ng spoiled goods, again, for the recovered amount, and magkikredit tayo ng work in process since ibabawas nga natin to that specific job yung ating recovered amount. Same computation with number 1, yung 300 natin comes from the recovered cost per unit, ito siya. And then, multiply lang natin by 200 spoiled units. We will be able to get 60,000. So, ganyan lang ang entry kapag specific job. Actually, wala siyang entry if and only if wala tayong recovered amount. Next, let's proceed to letter B. Unit selling price ulit if markup is 30%. So, magkakaroon po tayo ng onting changes dito sa ating computation. Ang unit cost natin would equal now to total cost minus recovered cost na lang over good units pa din. So, ang total cost natin would not change, 840,000 pa rin, minus recovered cost natin is ito, yung nasa taas, yung nasa ating entry, over good units natin, same pa din, mapa all jobs, mapa specific job, same pa rin po ang ating spoiled good units natin. And then, we will be able to get a unit cost of 975. So, kung mapapansin nyo po, hindi na siya same sa ating total manufacturing cost per unit na original. So, kapag ang tanong na sa exam ay specific job, syempre, kailangan na po nating mag-compute. And, ang reason din kung bakit tumaas ang ating unit cost is because, di ba, halos nagstay lang ating total manufacturing cost. Pero bumaba po kasi ang ating good units, hindi na 1,000. Kaya, syempre, tataas talaga ang ating unit cost. So, kung tumaas ang ating unit cost, expect na rin po natin na tataas ang ating selling price. Same computation lang with number 1, letter B, number 1, letter B, divide lang natin by 70% again since markup on sales po tayo. And then, we will be able to get our final answer which is 1,392.86.
Okay, singit lang ulit ako saglit para i-discuss ang last part ng topic na ito, which is ang defective units. So, ano nga ba ang defective units? Ang defective units is yung mga units na hindi pasok sa ating production standards pero pwede pa natin tong i-process further para maibenta pa rin natin sila as good units. So, just like sa spoiled units, meron din tayong two methods sa defective units, which is ang normal rework attributable to specific job.
So like the title itself, ang rework cost natin ay i-charge lang natin sa specific job na yon. Yung mga additional cost natin para sa materials, labor, and overhead ay i-charge natin sa lahat ng units na na-produce nung job na yon. So ang entry natin para dito ay we debit the work in process account and credit direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead applied. Now, syempre, since same lang to sa spoiled materials, alam nyo na kung ano yung kasunod. Okay, so ang kasunod natin is yung normal rework common to all jobs. So, gaya nga nung sa spoiled materials, ang cost natin ay i-charge natin sa manufacturing overhead and ipapakalat over all jobs. So, kung ang reason natin is normal, yung additional cost incurred natin ay i-charge sa lahat ng units produced during that period. So, paano nga ba ang entry naman dito? Ang entry naman natin dito is we debit factory overhead control and credit direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead applied. And syempre, hindi natin kakalimutan si abnormal rework. So, si abnormal rework, yung loss natin from abnormal rework is i-charge na natin directly sa income statement. So, let's proceed with Merced with some examples ulit.
Ayan, thank you ulit, Trisha. So, itry ulit natin, but this time, defective units naman tayo. So, we have the same scenario, except na yung 200 units na spoiled kanina is defective naman daw ngayon. So, if defective ang ating units, we still have the opportunity to sell them, but we are required or we must rework it. So, definitely, kung magre-rework tayo, we will incur additional cost. So, andito ang ating additional cost. It is written here that the final inspection revealed that the 200 units were incorrectly designed. So, incorrectly designed lang naman. So, pwede pa nating i-rework yan. To correct each defective unit requires 3.5 for materials, 2.30 for labor, and 2.20 for factory overhead. So, if we add all these, 3.5 plus 2.30 plus 2.20, we will get 8 pesos. So, our cost to rework per unit is 8 pesos. And the selling price of goods are sold 30% markup on cost. So, we are required to, number 1, make an entry again if the method used is charged to specific job. And number 2, make an entry again kung charge to all production naman. And number 3, cost per unit of the finished goods if letter A, specific job, letter B, charge to all production. So again, ulitin natin para mas malinaw. Pag specific job, work in process tayo magcha-charge. Kapag all production, manufacturing overhead. And this time naman, mag-e-end tayo sa unit cost lang naman tayo mag-e-end. Di na natin kailangan hanapin pa si selling price. Okay, let's proceed. Number 1 muna tayo, charge to specific job. Ang ating entry ay, ayan, we would have a debit to work in process and then i-credit natin lahat ng ating cost to rework. Yung mga additional cost nating binanggit kanina, yung 3.5, yung 2.30, and 2.20, i-credit lang natin into its respective accounts. And then we would have this amount. Yung total nito ay ito, yung i-debit natin kay or i-charge natin kay work in process. So, kaya natin i-charge again kay work in process dahil i-charge po natin sa specific job. Paano naman daw kapag all production? So, ang entry natin, same lang. Pero, dito tayo magkakaiba. Same lahat ng amounts, and then same lang ulit lahat ng ating cost to rework, except for the factory overhead control na ating i-debit. Kasi nga, again, we are charging the cost to rework into all production. Kaya factory overhead control ang ating i-debit. And another logic for this is, kapag kasi charge to specific job, yung additional cost po natin ay i-charge natin sa ating customer. Kapag naman charge to all production, i-charge lang natin yun sa ating expense. And walang isi-shoulder na panibagong cost ang ating customer. So, proceed na tayo sa pagkuha ng ating mga unit cost. Again, unahin natin kapag specific job. So, katulad ng sa ating spoiled units, we also have here a computation. So, ang computation natin ngayon for defective units would be unit cost equals total cost plus cost to rework over good units. So, mag-a-add tayo ng cost to rework since, di ba nga, nagdagdag tayo ng i-charge natin kay work in process. And ang ating good units, magkakaroon tayo ng onting pagbabago dito kapag defective na. Kasi ganito, di ba? Kapag spoiled units, hindi na natin mabibenta yung 200 na yon kanina. But this time, na defective lang siya, pwede pa natin siyang mabenta upon reworking. So, after rework, magiging good units din siya. So, walang magiging change sa ating good units. 1,000 pa rin siya, katulad ng original nating produced pieces of cakes. Upon computing this, we will get a unit cost of 841.60. Same lang naman ang ating total cost, and then ang ating cost to rework ay nanggaling lang dito sa ating computation ng cost to rework per unit multiplied by the defective units. Again, ito rin yung amount na charge natin kanina kay work in process, kaya nga idinagdag natin sa ating total cost. And kung mapapansin natin sa ating final answer, tumaas ang ating unit cost, 840 naging 841.60. Kasi nga, we are charging additional cost to the job and mag-shoulder ng panibagong cost to rework ang ating customer. Kaya tataas talaga ang ating unit cost. So, kunin naman natin ang unit cost kapag charge to all production. So, kung mapapansin nyo, ang ating computation for the unit cost ay total cost na lang over good units. Bakit hindi na tayo mag-a-add ng cost to rework? Again, wala na tayong charge na panibagong cost kay work in process. Kaya wala na tayong idadagdag pang cost to rework. So, ang 840,000 natin na total cost, i-divide lang ulit natin by our good units. Again, hindi 800 ang ating good units dahil defective lang tayo. We will get a unit cost of 840. Okay, so kung mapapansin nyo, same na naman po tayo ng ating original unit cost. Same tayo ulit sa ating original unit cost dahil, again, charge to all production. Ibig sabihin, mapa-spoiled yan, mapa-defective yan, we will get the same unit cost kapag charge to all production. So, kanina, nabanggit ni Trisha na pwede tayo makapag-incur ng abnormal loss. So, yun yung mga losses na hindi na ina-expect ng company namin. And, itatry ulit natin kung paano naman kung ganun, di ba? So, same scenario tayo, but the defective units are due to employee's fault, which is abnormal. So, syempre, hindi naman na i-expect ng aming company na magkakamali ang aming mga empleyado, pero hindi syempre maiiwasan. So, we are required now to make the journal entries for the abnormal losses, and alamin din natin kung may magbabago kaya sa ating cost per unit or wala. So, unahin natin gawin ang ating entry. Ang ating entry ay debit sa loss from rework, credit, raw materials inventory, factory payroll, and factory overhead applied. So, kapag abnormal po ang ating loss, hindi natin ita-charge kay work in process, hindi rin natin ita-charge kay factory overhead control, kung hindi ita-charge po natin kay loss from abnormal rework. So, ang loss from abnormal rework po or loss from rework ay isa na po siyang period cost. Ibig sabihin, hindi na siya, direkta na natin siyang makikita sa ating income statement. And, hindi na siya product cost. So, ang ating credit side po ay same lang. Siya lang din yung cost to rework natin kanina. At kapag ito ay tinotal, ito po siya, 1,600 na idinebit natin kay loss from rework. And kapag naman po abnormal spoilage, ang ide-debit natin dito ay loss from abnormal spoilage na or loss from spoilage. So, tignan natin kung paano natin i-compute ang ating unit cost. So, kung mapapansin nyo po, same lang siya with the computation natin ng defective units charged to all jobs. Total cost lang din over good units, makukuha natin ang ating unit cost na 840 pesos. And yes, same lang po ulit tayo sa ating original manufacturing cost per unit. So, if ever na ang tanong sa exam ay abnormal loss, edi hindi na po natin kailangan mag-compute. Just add all the total manufacturing cost and then we're done. In behalf of We Bake Breads and Trisha Janda, I am Mercedo Campo, and we are extending our gratefulness for imparting your time and for listening to us. We hope you have learned a lot, and we are really praying for the success of your journey, future CPAs. Good luck, God bless, and stay safe.